Hello, everyone. Another edition of the Auto Market, and today I'm going to be talking about three important things that are critical to our state of international affairs and security. The first thing is why the evolving Greenland Canadian relationship is not only important to both Greenland and Canada, but the world in general. Number two, I will be talking about the steps that Greenland needs to take in relationship to Canada if it's going to protect its sovereignty from continued aggression by the Trump regime. Number three, I will be talking about the important um, implications of the current environment and what needs to happen if the world is not going to drift into the fascist authoritarian anarchy that awaits us if we just let things evolve. And that is all predated, in my view, on the evolving Canada Greenland relationship. And this is based upon my background from the University of Toronto International Relations and my graduate studies background in international relations and my involvement since that time in politics, including the 1988 federal election and various roles that are political and government in nature. So let's go to the first step. The first thing I want to talk about is what is the importance of the Greenland-Canada relationship? Why are they coming together? Well, in simple terms, from the Canadian standpoint, with respect to the bellicose, crazy talk coming from Trump wanting to annex Greenland, Canada simply can't afford that to happen. This is why they took the step of having a consulate in Greenland to send a message in a very discreet tone that, we not only are going to verbally oppose Trump, but we are going to take action to show the Trump regime that Canada is independent from the United States, and we are going to respect the sovereignty of Greenland, and we are not going to continue to be silent on this matter because action speaks louder than words. So why did Canada do that? Because Canada can't afford the United States to be taking over Greenland. Most people think this is unlikely, but it's becoming more potentially likely because the Trump regime is being increasingly sociopathic, not only to the world, but its own people. And any regime that's sociopathic to its own people, you cannot expect anything better from the other parts of the world. Should not be expect anything better than how the people in a country is being treated, namely what's going on in which the United States, which is totally psychotic. So Canada cannot afford U.S. Trump potentially, following his psychotic dreams and taking over Greenland, because if the United States took over Greenland, that would squeeze Canada's north between Alaska and Greenland. And based upon the aggressive position of Trump, that would involve a significantly increased U.S. naval and other military presence to then occupy Canada's north and then completely obliterate Canadian national identity. So Canada cannot afford Greenland being taken over any more than Greenland themselves wants to be taken over. So the interest in the Greenlandic people wanting to remain an autonomous territory of Denmark and the interests of Canadians are 99% the same. There's no difference in our mutual interest between Canada and Greenland. We can't afford that to happen. Greenland doesn't want it to happen. We don't want it to happen for the similar interests. The whole idea of United States moving into Greenland is like you have a house. Picture you have a house in a nice neighborhood, and all of a sudden a bunch of crack people take over the backyard. Well, if a psychotic, crazy crack people take over the backyard, well, they're probably going to be moving into your place pretty quick. So that's pretty much. So right now we have Denmark occupying. We're sharing Denmark space with Denmark and Canada. We're sharing the space, and it's two similar benevolent-oriented society similar to space, and we can't afford Trump to be moving on there with his psychotic militarism. So, and the Greenland people, they don't want to be taken over by Trump for various obvious reasons. Trump says, oh, well, the new envoy, oh, well, we want to have the dialogue with the Greenlandic people. No, Greenland people already said they're not interested. They're not interested in having any dialogue. They're interested in going over, taking over, mining the place, turning the place into a moon colony pretty much with their extraction of resources and using it as a military fortress, which people in Greenland would be completely dispossessed of their lands, just like what's going on with Palestine. The whole place would become turned over from being a icy paradise to a completely toxic moonscape. That's what the Greenlandic people have in their future. They're not interested in any of this quality of life proposition that the envoy's talking about, Trump talking about. It's a bunch of nonsense. If Trump regime respected sovereignty of Greenland, they would not be continuing to engage in this bellicosity. So, that's completely outrageous. So that's step number one we're talking about. That the Canadian and Greenlandic interest in protecting the sovereignty of an autonomousness of Greenland relative to Denmark is 99% the same. Is completely no different. The Inuit people, don't want the Americans moving up there, turning their place into a military operation of imperialism and a toxic moonscape of oil drilling either. So they don't want, nobody wants it. Nobody wants in Canada and, as far as Greenland, this is not in the Canadian national interest, not in the Greenlandic interest, the people themselves as expressed by the people. So number two is what Greenland needs to do. So the first step the Canadians took was to the foreign minister of Canada, Anand, was to announce a Canadian consulate operation that's going to be opening up early in 2026. That's the first step. But that's not going to be sufficient. If Greenland wants to show itself and to reaffirm its sense of sovereignty and its sense of identity, they need to start to reciprocate this very quickly. They can't just be waiting around. They have to show that they are a nationality. They have an independent identity. So, and at the same time, the Greenlandic people, unlike the United States, they have been very positive with respect to this Canadian consular operation. Very positive, So I saw one of their representatives, Mr. Broberg, I believe his name, was very positive. And this is exactly what the Americans theoretically want. They want Greenlandic people to be positive to them, but they're not going to be getting it because they are acting like ugly Americans. They are pugnacious. And they are just acting like the barbarians in the worst sense of the Romans, when the Roman Empire was in the process of decaying. So Canadians are moving up there, showing our resilience, showing that the Greenland is the extension of our sovereignty. We have sovereignty in the north, and the Greenland as an autonomous territory is in the interest of Canadian sovereignty. So the Greenland needs to open up consular operations in Canada. That's the second step they need to take in Ottawa. That's step number two, to have a presence whereby of interaction with respect to exploring mutual interests. It would act as an administrative hub in the same way that the Canadian consular operation in Nuuk would operate as an administrative operation as well. So Greenland, alongside the Embassy of Denmark, they critically need a consular operation. Step number two is that there needs to be a formal, in my view, delegation of Greenlandic operations touring the country and establishing themselves and towards a consular office as well at the same time. So that'd be the ensuing step after having a consular operation, is an actual formal delegation to explore Canada and to see to what extent strong relations can be developed between politicians of, not just the Carney government, but through provinces and through economic relationships with various businesses and corporations, so sort of a tour. And number three, would, in my view, they need to do is to establish something like a Canada Greenland Office of Economic Cooperation, which would have the goal of establishing relationships with Canada, which are going to increase the supply chain and strengthen a supply chain between Greenland and North America in a way which is going to substantively lower prices in Greenland, because right now Greenland is highly dependent on Denmark for anything from supermarkets to everyday life, and the cost of shipping stuff from Europe to Greenland is very expensive and puts up substantially the cost of living. So by developing a Canadian consular operations, by developing a economic cooperation through a formalized institution between Greenland and Canada, where you encourage Canadian investment, you encourage supply lines coming through Canada, through Newfoundland, and through Churchill, which is eventually, when that Churchill port eventually developed, that the Carney government considers a nation-building project. That is going to be critical, because through Churchill, that is the fourth step. So the Churchill, as many people know about, is in the northern part of Manitoba. It goes through Hudson Bay, and when any ships go between this Churchill in Manitoba, they have to go by Nuuk in Greenland in order to get out to Europe and Iceland and the rest of the world. So Nuuk would be have a critical interest in consolidating a relationship with Canada, consolidating the relationship of its Inuit in Greenland with Northern Canada, and well as consolidating its relationship with and its interest in the development of Churchill as a new Canadian port, a sort of northern version of the Panama Canal. That'll be a very critical development. So that is the fourth thing that's very important, is a Churchill port. And that Churchill port hopefully is done in a sustainable way, not to destroy the environment up there, but Churchill could become a model of environmental sustainability if it starts to develop economically and attract Canadians up there and become larger. I vision Churchill as being transforming our Canadian identity towards being an identity of people who are largely populating areas 100 kilometers from the U.S. border, to a more northern-focused identity where we start to embrace our northernness, and the extent to which Churchill would become a key to transforming our identity towards a more northern focus through this port facility, which could be have a strong relationship with Greenland in terms of if Nuuk and both Churchill could reinforce each other in terms of northern development. So that takes me to the geopolitics, which is my last point. We're in a situation whereby the Trump regime wants to divide the world into various power blocks. United States wants to control of the whole of Western Hemisphere, including South America, Latin America, and Canada. Then he wants to divide up a Russian bloc. I guess he wants Russia to eventually move into Europe, while saying that he's against Russia and he's against China. That's not what his action is talking about. He seems to want to divide the world into Russia, China, and United States. And what's going to be happening with that is that we are in a situation where the world's leading superpower since World War II has been focused on, and again, I have this book as a segue, Mississippi and its People in front of me, because that is a book which I had worked on by the Cree, and it's basically the Cree and the Oldie and First Nations and the Inuit up there. This port, it would be a critical, transformative context in terms of not only Canadian identity in general, but First Nations identity and sort of gaining the economic independence. And hopefully, again, this has to be done in a sustainable way because, but notwithstanding that, let's get back to this reality of Trump. So Trump was United States since World War II, everybody knows about it, has been the leading democracy. Now we have the bizarre situation where Trump is trying to move United States away from what Hegseth talks about is idealism. Hegseth and this Trump regime doesn't want the United States being the leading democracy anymore. He wants the United States, the Trump regime with Hegseth, want the United States to become an authoritarian regime that goes around intimidating countries, and controlling them and engaging in transactional foreign policies to gain their resources. Okay, so here's the situation with Canada. Canada has two choices here, relative to what's the sort of the bizarre attitude with Trump and wanting to divide up the world in terms of a sort of a respective Nazi authoritarian fascist blocs. If Trump gets his way and takes over Greenland, then that's going to completely create an environment where, okay, you take Greenland, China takes Taiwan, Russia takes Europe, maybe Russia, and Africa divide up Africa amongst themselves. A completely fascist authoritarian regime. This is what we in the world cannot afford. People who look towards democracy and value democracy cannot afford where the Trump regime is going with respect to Greenland. So what is the alternative? We need a country that's going to essentially replace American leadership in the world with, so we need a country. But Europe can't do it, and Britain can't do it. The problem with Europe is that it has too much colonial baggage, so it is in no position as a continent, and there's no country there that can assume that role. The only country in the world that can assume the role of replacing the United States, and again, most people think this is crazy, long shot, whatever, is Canada. Canada does not have although it has a lot of problems with respect to colonialism as indigenous people, Canada has the strongest core value system based upon multiculturalism, based upon its identity and peacekeeping, its identity as a society which embraces the idealism that the United States is trying to dump. Canada needs to replace the United States as a superpower. Now, Carney government has talked about making Canada an economic superpower, but it needs to go beyond that into terms of to become a energy superpower and an actual superpower. Again, most people would think this is crazy; it's never going to happen. But in World War II, Canada rose to the fascist challenge by the Nazis. Canada had a minuscule military, a minuscule navy with a handful of ships like we have right now. By the end of World War II, Canada mobilized and had 400 ships. Canada was the third largest navy in the world. Most people don't know that, with over 400 ships. Canada had the third largest navy behind Britain and United States. And that was done and accomplished within about 4 years. So Canada needs to focus on recapturing that spirit of World War II and becoming a military and economic superpower. Okay? So Canada has two choices. Canada can either succumb to the Monroe Doctrine of being able to be a vassal colonial state of Trump, where he potentially invades us and invades Greenland and takes over the Western Hemisphere, and so that we have a Orwellian state of a handful of dictators running the whole world and pillaging in it and destroying the whole place. We can either look to that future, or we can look to a future where Canada t- replaces the United States and becomes a military and economic and energy superpower, a superpower at all levels. And the Carney government's nation building effort is a sort of precursor to that. The desire of the Carney government to have 300,000 citizen soldiers is a precursor to that. And if Canada doesn't, so there's no two choices here. Either you are able to defend yourself as Canadians, either we can either defend ourselves or we can be taken over. Okay, and the only way to defend ourselves is to us to accelerate into a World War II state of economic development and growth that is going to put us in a position to be able to withstand the U.S. aggression and aggression from anywhere else. This is what we have to do. And going back to Greenland and Canada, Greenland is going to would be an essential basis of Canada becoming a military superpower. Because if Canada and Greenland come together and are able to forge a sort of a territorial integrity of being able to protect ourselves, to mutually benefit through mutual economic cooperation, and to show the world that, wow, Canada and Greenland are coming together. And again, this is not excluding Denmark. Denmark needs to be a part of this equation as well. I'm not suggesting that that Greenland move away from Denmark. I'm suggesting that an extra layer of sovereignty where Greenland maintains its relationship to Denmark, but at the same time enters in some type of common market, some type of formalized political economic structure, which is going to withstand any a takeover from that the Americans are planning. So a clear signal to Trump that Greenland is not going to sit around, that Greenland protects its territorial integrity, and it will wash away completely the argument, oh, this is far distant country, you don't really have control, this is the Trump view. No, Greenland needs to start to transform itself in the same way Canada needs to transform its identity as being a relatively small time power to a superpower to withstand this aggression. And by Greenland joining in that is going to be a positive signal to the world that these Canadians are there to not just, it's going to be a positive signal to the world that Canada is going to reassert itself, that we are not some simply pushovers. Everybody knows that. This is how we were able to withstand Hitler. This is how we were able to liberate the Netherlands. Canadians need to go in a footing now. Canadians need to buy their Gripen because, again, the F-35s are going towards the direction of assimilation, technological control. The Swiss have already understood this. The Swiss Army, they bought the F-35s. Costs have skyrocketed, and they have figured out that the Americans have the complete technical control over what goes on. Swiss have been a neutral society, and now they've figured out that United buying planes buying the F-35s like they did has not been in their interest to remain neutral and to not be pulled into the American orbit. So that is my take. Canada needs Greenland, and Greenland needs Canada, and the Danes, the Greenland and Canada need to work together to forge a new northern identity through working with Canada to build a sovereignty of amongst ourselves, to affirm our sovereignty, at the same time do this, work together, not just for ourselves, but towards an agenda of reasserting democracy, the value of democracy, standing up to a fascist regime like we stood up under in World War II. We have to stand up to. We stood up to Adolf Hitler, and now we have to stand up to the Trump regime. We have to be seen as we have to replace essentially United America's role. Before the Trump regime, we have to replace that role and be seen to be the champion of democracy and the superpower that the United States once championed. If we as a world are going to prevent ourselves from slipping into a fascist dictatorial regime, the choice between the United States, Chinese, and Russian axis, to borrow the language from World War II, or a Canadian-led world that starts to champion democracy, champion the values of democracy with Europe, with like-minded countries, and repair the damage that has been caused for centuries upon centuries upon centuries of destruction in Africa, destruction in Latin America, destruction in the Middle East, destruction throughout the world, through a Canada rebuilding its sense of values, its sense of identity, its sense of commitment to our multicultural identity, to our values for social justice. Through that, we can once again champion not only a Canada of our dreams based upon values of a just society for all, but a society which is going to project that type of identity to the rebuilding of the world that has been too long neglected at all levels of environmental, that has degraded into environmental chaos, and now political chaos under the Trump wrecking ball. So this is my 2 bits worth in terms of what we need to do is, 1, the importance of the Greenland, Canada coming together. 2, the steps that Greenland needs to take if it is to consolidate and achieve and protect its sovereignty. And 3, the geopolitical importance of Canada, Greenland coming together to the future of the world relative to the world that Trump is trying to take the whole place into, which is a Department of War, to quote his Department of War. He wants to take the place in the complete survival of the fittest, a complete destructive environment where it's completely predatory, where only the strong survive and the weak perish, into increasing poverty and destruction and pollution and decay. This is what we have to look forward to with the Trump, Chinese, Russian axis. The alternative is a Canadian championed world which builds on our critical values that has led us to be respected in the world. But we, as Canadians, we just simply cannot be complacent anymore. We have to act on those values. We can't just preach them. We have to act on those values. We have to repair the destruction of First Nations. We have to repair all sorts of poverty which is going on in Canada. So we as Canadians need to come together. We need to start mucking about, and we need to start championing a superpower society that's going to be the society of our dreams based upon our values. No more hypocrisy. We have to be focused. We have to be determined, and we have to be determined to pull out of this chaotic environment that Trump has caused into a world where we as Canadians are able to hold our own, defend our society from annexation, to work together with Greenland in a mutual interest of defending our mutual sovereignty and building a Canadian society which is going to rise to the challenge of being a superpower as we rose in World War II. This is essential for peace and stability in the world. And we as Canadians have done it before, and we can do it. We need to rise to fascism. We need to start mucking about. We need to start all this, the distraction going on in Alberta, the distraction going on with these separatists trying to destroy the society from within. This is what Trump wants. We need to stop mucking about and start focusing on our priorities. Do we want to be a destroyed society living under a Trump-led chaos, or do we want to be a society where there's justice for all, where people are treated respectfully, where national sovereignty is respected, where we as Canadians can can survive and in an environment of democratic nations which respect each other, or are we going to be in an environment which is going to be completely chaos, predatory, which is based upon transactional affairs, where it's based upon war, control, annexation, enslavement? Do we want that type of vision of Trump, or do we want a vision that's championed based upon the Canadian ideals, which are supposedly the ideals of the United Nations, but we as Canadians have a critical role to play, and it's up to we as Canadians to decide what we want to do. Are we going to muck about and allow Trump to destroy our society, to take us over, and to become a destroyed colony of resource colony alongside Greenland of the Trump Orwellian nightmare scenario? Or are we as Canadians going to start to champion our values in a way which is going to push us toward the superpower society that we need to become if we are able to defend ourselves and help defend the world from complete destruction, from a authoritarian, predatory chaos which awaits us if we continue to be complacent. Thanks for watching another edition of The Auto Market. Look forward to your comments below.